Hey guys, welcome back to Dear Frannie. Today I am joined by two powerhouses, Don Varady and Nancy Bigley, two folks who are just some of my favorites. So I'm excited to jump into what we have for you today. But first, let me give you a little background on Don and Nancy. So Don is co-founder and CEO at Clean Eatz, a lifestyle brand that has more than 100 locations of healthy dining cafes, which also offer meal plans, grab and go, catering, and the cafe. Yeah, the restaurant. And Nancy is with us. She is president of Snapology and Little Gym, and is just phenomenal at everything. One of the things that I talk about when I talk about Nancy is her amazing skill at franchise relations. So I'm excited for her to tackle some of the questions that we have for you guys today. So welcome, folks.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you.
So we're going to kick off today with our hot take segment. So our hot takes are something that is your opinion, could be controversial about what's happening, hopefully within the franchise industry. So let's kick off. Don, I'm going to kick off with you because I'm sure you got one in the cannon.
Oh boy. I would say I was thinking about this. I'm trying to figure out how to say it without, because I know Jason Barclay, my development guy, is going to hear this and he's going to have a heart attack when he hears me, but I have a firm distaste for the franchise broker network. You know, like the brokerage firms, like I don't want to name them, but you know, the ones where you pay to buy into their inventory and that whole thing, like that whole franchise brokerage system to me is, I'm not a fan.
So what would be the one thing you would do like to fix it?
I'm sorry.
What would be one thing that you would do to fix it?
Well, kind of like what Jason and I have done here in the last few years is kind of shift from dumping a lot of money into those systems like that and spending more of that money on the organic side. Just trying to go get more better culture fit folks for us, because we are a different brand than a lot of similar companies. The culture that we have within our brand is a lot different than the restaurant industry as a whole.
Yeah.
The perfect franchisee for us does not have to have any food background. We actually would prefer that they don't. And so I think the problem we had in the beginning with that is those brokerage networks were going out and finding folks with, tons of money because they were trying to find the financial qualification in them. And then, us being a restaurant, food-based business, they thought that the food-based thing was, they put way more weight on it than what we really need.
Interesting.
When actually we prefer them not to have any at all, to be honest with you. So.
So it's the culture fit. They're not bringing like people that or candidates that fit within the culture of Clean Eatz. So that's the challenge that you have with it.
Yeah, that was my big disconnect in the beginning. And then, I mean, anybody in franchising will tell you, they'll shake their head yes when you say it, is when you turn down a broker or a salesman's, lead, they're going to get a little defensive, and rightfully so. They worked hard for it and they're trying to get them in the door. But if they get mad at you when you sit there and continually just to tell them no. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that is a bummer. Nancy, what do you think?
I struggle with that one too. I never went the broker route for a lot of the reasons that Don mentioned. When I had my franchise, we definitely used them at some of the brands that I had. I think with anything, there are good and bad, right? Like I think, unfortunately, most of our experiences have been some of the things that Don has mentioned, but I do think in certain cases it can be, and I've heard it, and I've had the same sort of back and forth conversation and argument with some franchisor friends of mine over the years and heard other sides, right? So I have heard how it has been beneficial for some brands because, look, if you want to grow really quickly, that is a way to do it. You definitely give up the money on the front end, which is very valuable, especially when you're a young emerging brand. And then the danger, of course, is exactly what you said, Don, which is bringing in the wrong people. So I think it's just making sure that, there are those really honest and thoughtful conversations at the very beginning about who you want, who you don't want. And like, if someone doesn't meet the criteria, it will be a hard no for me. And I don't want to hear about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so I think if you can find the right partner, they're going to get that. And even internally, right? Like I deny candidates with our own team here, and I take a lot of heat for it sometimes. And they're like, well, we would have hit our number if you wouldn't have rejected my candidate. I'm like, well, bring me better candidates. So like, I wouldn't have to reject them if it was the right person. And that's my job. Is I don't want to reject candidates, but I will, because I have to deal with them on the other side. And we're all very supportive of that, but I know it is painful for this. They spend so much time with them. It is painful to get a no at the end, but I think we learn from it. And my job is I have to be very articulate if I do reject someone, to say, why did you reject them? What could we have done differently? And so I do a deep download with my team here about it. And I think on the broker side, it's kind of the same, right? Like, these are the reasons why I really felt uncomfortable, or the team really felt uncomfortable with this person. And so hopefully the next time, that doesn't happen. So yeah, that's a very controversial one for sure. It's a great topic because tough. It's a tough decision.
Right, because some brands get built on the broker network.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and two, I think that, for emerging brands, it is a you're outsourcing your sales team to that broker
Yeah.
network. And how else do I get started if I'm not going that route? But I think, it's good to understand what those pros and cons are. And it sounds like we're aligned in that the cons are really the candidates coming through are going through the broker process, not your brand process. And so coming out of that, they may not be the best fit.
Yeah, and I think that the big danger is with the emerging franchisors, because they don't know any better usually, right? They're still learning what their profile is and all the ins and outs of it if they haven't been in franchising before. And that's when I get really angry, is when I see, someone connecting with, a passionate young emerging franchisor that doesn't know any better and really takes advantage of that situation. And that really is disappointing, but,
Especially when they don't have any money in the beginning. They pay a lot of money to get in those networks,
yeah.
just to get, people that they don't really aren't not going to be a good fit long term.
Yeah.
Well, good. That was good. That was a good discussion. Nancy, what do you have for us for your hot topic?
Oh boy. I think which one I will go with today is, it's okay to have an honest conversation with your franchisees about exiting your network. I think a lot of franchisors are either they don't feel they can have that conversation, or they're afraid to have that conversation. I like to have that conversation. I think if it's approached in the right manner. So if you're seeing red flags, if you're seeing either performance shifting, you're seeing attitude shift, and you're continuing to try to get them back on track and it's not working and they don't seem to be happy, I think we owe our franchisees the courtesy to sit them down and say, look, you don't seem happy anymore. You're also not performing well any longer. We are here to help support you and help you grow your business. But at the end of the day, if you're not comfortable with things that are happening and you can't get on board, we probably should really start talking about resale. And I found over the years in having those conversations, again, they're very respectful. It's not like, get on board or get out. It's you don't seem happy anymore. You don't seem passionate anymore, because look, like, selling your business is part of the journey. Like, at some point that's going to happen. It's okay. It's not a dirty word. And I've found over the years that most franchisees feel like if they bring it up, it's maybe a sign of failure, or that they can't, make it happen. And so sometimes I just see the relief, like, yeah, I've been thinking about it too. I just didn't know what to do. Like, they don't know what to do. There's anger. And again, I think like I'm in these situations, right? Like, we've been acquired and our franchisees are going through tremendous change. And sometimes it's just, they can't get to the other side. And so I do think it's too easy to just sort of, they're just them and they're just nasty and mean. And whatever, I'm just going to ignore them and not deal with them. Well, you have to. Like, I feel like that's our responsibility as franchisors. We owe it to them to try to help. And then if we can't help, to help them exit. And it's just, again, I think it's a very healthy conversation, and it's something that should be ongoing, and part of our DNA and part of our operations and our metrics and all those different things, especially as you start maturing as a franchisor.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I even was at a roundtable one time where the franchisor in the discovery day process talked about what is your exit strategy, which I thought was brilliant because, and maybe it's because I'm me and I am a mover and I switch things a lot. But the idea of I'm going to sign a 10-year agreement, and a lot of times when we're working with franchisees, it's people who have been in the corporate world and are about to start a new business. Committing 10 years is a long time. And look, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the length of our agreements, but understanding the end in mind, right? Like, how are you going to exit and what does a successful exit look like for you? Thinking about that helps to set up those conversations. And it's a little bit different than what you're referencing, which I completely 100% agree with as well. But to add to that, I think having those exit conversations, even in the beginning process, to say, you're not going to die with us. This is, this is your dream and this is a business and we're here to make you successful. But at the end of the day, it is also a job that you may need to move on from.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I do think having it as part of the discovery, or at least part of the training, is healthy, because if you sort of start with the end in mind and work backwards, I think it makes them more aggressive in taking, really like pushing the needle on where they want to go with the business. Because if you want to get to here in order to feel comfortable enough to sell your business and get out of it what you want to get out of it, you've got to every year make sure that you're driving towards that. So I agree with you. I think that's a really interesting way. Not many do it, but it is I think a really healthy conversation as early as possible.
Don, what do you think?
I agree 1,000%. And I've kind of tackled this issue, if that's what you want to call it, on a couple of different levels and from different angles. The ones that you have trouble with, and like you were saying, they struggle getting on board with different things within the system, compliance and whatnot. I've had many of those. I've had to deal with those. It's never easy to do. So I have done it, and you're right, it is very important. But something else that I do is I think it's October 1, I usually get a list of stores that I think that if they don't turn it around in Q4, they're not going to make it through next year. And so it's usually like our bottom 5 or 6 stores that have really struggled throughout the year. And I call it the fourth quarter reckoning. I just pick up the phone and start calling those 5 or 6 stores and saying, listen, this is the reality of it. Whether you want to accept it or not, I know it's hard to hear, but you're going to have to start thinking of this. So the math, it's simple math. The money coming in doesn't equal the money going out. And before you lose everything, can we figure out a way to get you out so that you don't file bankruptcy or lose your house or, lose everything that you have? And I've seen people take that advice and do it and come away okay. And then I've had 2 or 3 others that didn't heed that advice, and we've had 2 former franchisees file bankruptcy and lose everything they owned, which is never sits well with me. It gets a pit in my stomach. I hate to see it, but you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So
right. And I think that's where some healthy attrition is also okay, where, in what I have seen in the brands that I've worked in is when that kind of the wave of legacy franchisees starts to maybe shift, the brand needs to evolve and shift, and your franchisees are not necessarily evolving and shifting with you. Getting new blood in helps you just go so much faster. And so, I think it's really healthy. You got to trim the trees every now and then to see growth. That was a good one. Thank you, Nancy. My hot take today is that so oftentimes I hear about people hiring for culture fit first. If we find a great person, we'll find work for them. before really thinking about the role they have for them and or the skills they need for that role. And it drives me nuts. And if you have a role that you need to fill, you need to define it, and you need to find somebody with the skills to fill it, because otherwise that person is lost within your organization. They do not have clear expectations, and they are not set up for success. And so I really don't like it when people want to hire for culture first.
I think that's fair. I think culture fit is critically important, but you're right. But if you don't have the skills to do not just the job that you're hired for, but ideally we should be looking a couple positions ahead, right? Because if we don't have potential growth, a growth career path for someone, then we're not going to have them long enough to really get traction, and they might get tapped out pretty quickly, which is, kind of a bummer when you're just getting somebody up to speed. So I agree. I think I'm always like that. Like I want to know that you can actually do the work and you can keep up with the work, but then certainly like the things that we all have to adhere to and be okay with in an organization has to be there. Otherwise they're going to burn out fast and it's just going to be a rub. But yeah.
Don, have you guys ever hired for culture first? I know that because Clean Eatz culture is just phenomenal, and I know that it's core. So curious about that.
We did. You guys are absolutely right. We made that mistake early on on the franchise business, right? The corporate side. The first few corporate employees that Yvonne and I hired, we had personal relationships with. And so we were like, well, I'd rather have somebody that I know and that I can work with every day. And that was a complete disaster. Would never advise anyone doing that just to think that it's going to be easier to work with that person because you know them and they agree with, whatever your mission lifestyle is or whatever the brand mission is. I absolutely agree. Hire for the skill set, because the culture piece can be adapted. I mean, I can, without naming names, like half of our corporate office right now, when they first came to us, they didn't live the same kind of lifestyle we did. They didn't know anything about health and nutrition, but they knew everything about the job skill that they had. And they adopted the culture over time because, what we do here kind of rubs off and it's positively impacted everybody in this building. I'll throw Brand's name out there, Yvonne's right hand. That guy has lost an entire human in terms of like body mass and composition. I mean, he eats healthy now. I mean, he's a machine. Like he's completely altered his life since he's worked here. So
Yeah,
I think the culture can be adapted along the way. I don't think you need it up front at all.
well, that's even a hot take, Don, because I think that in this world where culture is the buzzword and we talk about it all the time, it is important. It's become a little too buzzy for me, but I agree. I think that if I'm going to attract the people who are going to thrive with me, and so if you're going to be a good skill set fit and you're going to learn how we work, you're going to weed yourself out if you're not that good culture fit. So I like that point of view.
I think one of the best things that I ever heard, I go to a strength and conditioning kind of event or network through the Sorinex exercise equipment company. I'm really good friends with their founder and a lot of guys on their team, and they hold some really cool educational events and stuff every year. It's where Yvonne and I are going this weekend, but they do one in the summertime where they hire keynote speakers. Like the entire weekend is keynote speakers. And one of the best things I ever heard was from University of South Carolina strength coach. His entire keynote was on culture, and he kind of got up there and debunked a lot of people's approach and mentality when it comes to company or team culture. He said, how did he say that? He said people, they go about it wrong. They say that I'm going to create my company culture. Well, you don't create culture. Culture creates itself. And then you realize what that is along the way. I just thought that was awesome because Yvonne and I were trying to attempt to do that. We were kind of spinning our wheels because we were so young in the business. We were like, well, what do we stand for? We didn't really know, to be honest with you, in the beginning. And then just over time, it kind of evolved on its own.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, next topic. We'll do a whole thing on culture. Could talk about it all day. All right, well, let's jump into our question for today. I will read it out for us. So our question is, I am getting ready to roll out a new technology platform to my system. I have 50 units, 10 are company owned and 40 are franchised, mostly single unit owners. The new platform will help the franchisees manage their inventory, but since it is a new cost, we are not paying for it out of the tech fee. How would you go about driving the adoption of this system among our franchisees? So I made Don go first on hot takes. So Nancy, I'll let you start us off.
Okay, great. I love this question because it just made me think of all the mistakes that I've made, which most of the time that's the learnings I share. It's like, do it this way, not the way I did it. But the way I envision it, again, based off of sort of learnings over the years, is I would start off with just a few company-owned locations. So don't do the whole banana, because technology, as much as we plan it and as much as we think it's going to work the way we want it to work, it usually doesn't. So don't like take down your whole company on network at one time. So I would start with probably 2 or 3. And I would sort of roll it out there and just kind of see what's going on, right? Like it could take a month, it could take 2 months. Like, I don't know what the time frame would be. It takes as long as it takes. But make sure that like there's no major bugs in there, make sure it functions the way it's supposed to function. See if it creates any operational challenges, just, any customer journey challenges, all those sorts of things. And then, obviously I would gain feedback from team members, customers on flow, process, and all of that. Ensure data integrity. I think that's the other thing I've learned as we've navigated to new technology platforms, is making sure that the data is synced up and it's as close to apples as you could get, because you don't want to lose that historical data that you have. So that's really important. So just make sure all of those pieces are making sense, and tweak and do whatever you need to do to get those things fixed. And then obviously, as you're doing that, that's the time to also build training materials because we often forget about that part. We usually don't have them in a pilot, so that's the time to get the training materials at least put together and started. And so once you kind of would move through the 3, then I would go to sort of pilot phase 2, and that would include franchisees. So I'd probably say probably 2 franchisees and a 2 to 3 more of your company units. And so just sort of take it to the next phase. And hopefully after the second phase, that's where you're going to be able to really vet it and build that case study, because I think ultimately that's what you're trying to do, is build that white paper, right? Of sort of like, what happened? How did it work? How do you migrate through? How do you migrate customer data? Just all of those things, so that you're building that best. It's never going to be perfect. So I think we never want to wait till it's perfect, because it won't be, and then you'll go too far down the road. But I think just make sure that that next wave is just very minor little fixes that you have to do. The training materials are pretty buttoned up. And then once you feel comfortable with that, then build your complete role and phase in, because if it's not something that's mandatory, I can't tell if it was mandatory or not. I'm assuming it is mandatory, but they have to pay for it. So anytime franchisees have to pay for anything, you've really got to be able to show the why behind it. Like, why do we need to change at all? So that why has to be there, front and center. And then I would include the franchisees in the pilot as your spokesperson people. And those would be the people that really are speaking to the franchisees and talking through the migration and talking through phases with you as partners. And that typically leads to a better end result.
Yeah, so I'm going to call out something that you didn't say explicitly, but it slow and steady, right? Because oftentimes I see we get really excited about the new shiny object, and we go to implement it, and when we haven't gone through that slow and steady pilot program, that's when adoption falls out, because you can't prove out anything. And when a franchisee gets a system and it's not fully baked and they're not in a pilot, they're not happy.
Right.
And so I have seen franchises take on new technology, think the technology is going to be the thing that gets them to the KPI that they want, and they rush it. And then it falls flat, and you've just invested all of this time and money and resources, even though you didn't do it the long way, on a program that you're going to have to abandon. And then And then all of a sudden you've abandoned the idea of it and your KPIs are out the window and the whole year is shot.
Yeah, and I think even, you know, like we've moved through a lot, and it's like well, we're getting there, but it's just more painful, right? Like it's how do you reduce the amount of pain? How do you get ahead of the communication? And it can be tough when you really have to get off of an old archaic system, right? And it's like chicken and the egg. Sometimes like you can't wait too long. Things are going to start shutting down. So sometimes you are sort of pushed into faster adoption than you would want. But again, I think mistakes that, you know, I've made or our teams have made is just really getting ahead of the conversation and the communication and allowing at least enough time to be able to, you know, get the feedback, get some things buttoned up before you kind of move to the next phase. But yeah, agree.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would say, based on your comments too, is around selecting those franchisees that are going to be in the pilot, because because they're your spokespeople. You want someone who's connected in the network. You don't want a guy who's kind of off. He may be operating the best location, but if he's not influential in the network, you need the influencer to really be testing out the system.
Yeah, great point. Great point.
Don, what do you have to add to that?
Two things. One, I think Nancy was reading my notes that are in front of me, almost verbatim. But then two, I literally just wrapped up, or we're almost about 98% there, but I'm on the tail end of literally living through this. So I don't know if that's why you picked this, but we just went through a complete tech rollover, a POS rollover that took 2 years to implement. Many reasons why it took that long, but one of them was we were going slow for a reason. The big thing for us was, like you said, showing them the value in it. The main reason that we decided to do it, just for history, is enterprise reporting. And franchisees were, especially in our industry, they're very data driven. They wanted data. And the system that we were on was very user friendly, but it lacked a lot of tools on the back end to give the franchisees the data that they wanted to see, and for us. And so we made a decision to switch, and then we got bombarded with the cost. And I'm like, okay, well, you wanted this, you asked me to do this, so I did this, and now you're pushing back because you have to pay for it. It's not free. And so after massaging those conversations, we got our franchise advisory council on board with the decision that we made, and the one that we wound up switching with, and they all rolled it out first. That went great. And then we started doing it by regions, like you were mentioning, like just picking a selective group at a time. And then once we got it to where we were working all the kinks out ourselves, then we just put everybody on a rollover list. And it was just when your name was up in the queue, that's when you switched over. The one that we're struggling with now is our inventory piece, the one that you mentioned in the question. You know, a lot of them are pushing back on this because it's a lot in the restaurant business to do inventory on a bi-weekly basis or a monthly basis. So the biggest complaint is actually doing it. And I'm trying to tell them, like, look, this is our reasons why we made this decision to do it in the first place. One, you asked us, but this is the value, and this is how it can be done. And that was kind of proven. Last week we did our first, I call it top group, but I put together another council that solely focused on unit economics. It was our top 10 the top 10 who had the highest EBITDA in the system. And we just tackled big topic items like labor management, food cost, all of the big KPIs in the restaurant business. But we started with labor management, and 2 of them came out of the gate with this tool and was like, this tool is the greatest thing we've ever done. Here's the KPIs that we're using from it. It's great, blah, blah, blah. And so after that call, I had the other 8 were like, okay, I see it now. Like we're bought in, I'm gonna start using it. So it's just kind of, you get 1 or 2 to prove it out and start voicing about it, and then they all kind of buy in. I think they're just skeptical because of the cost up front, but.
And just change, right? Like technology changes are not fun. It's relearning it all and then teaching your team. And if you're really busy in running your business, like it's a burden, it's a real burden. So I think we underestimate that, and we underestimate just that, like, oh my God, the dread of it all, right? Like, I think franchisees know typically when they get to the other side, it's going to be better, but just the thought of moving through it can be so debilitating, and having to explain it, reteach their customers if it's customer facing. And again, I think we really underestimated some of those feelings and fears. Not that you can do a lot about it, but I think there is ways to sort of train through some of it and do sort of like, what if? So if this comes up, or if that happens, and helping them answer some of those questions to their team or to their customers, that's where they get really scared, is that they'll look stupid and they won't be able to answer questions. And I get it. It's not a fun feeling. So yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. It's a fear of new technology. But I think you guys both hit on what, I think the secret to adoption is peer relations. If you can get franchisees to talk to other franchisees, that is when the magic of adoption happens. And, as a corporate team, we can say till we're blue in the face, this is what you should do. But at the end of the day, and look, rightfully so, sometimes the point of view on corporate is, well, you're sitting in an office and I'm day to day with my people. And so you can't possibly understand what I'm going through. And so, getting that peer-to-peer interaction is, the most powerful thing that you can do. And I, a lot of times I get the question from franchisors around, well, how do I get franchisees to do the things that I want them to do? And I have to say, like, look, you can talk to your blue in the face, but the emails and the calls and the whatnot can only go so far. And if you really truly want adoption, it's going to be coming from peer-to-peer activation.
Yeah, and sometimes it does come down to a couple of franchisees calling their buddies and going, just do it. Like, It's going to be painful the first month. And that's what we had happen in our network. It's going to be painful the first month. You're not going to like it. But after that, it's not bad. Like, it's fine. Yeah. And then you're right. They listen to them like, okay, fine, I'll do it.
Right. Jump in the deep end.
I kind of really want to use that joke with my wife. The thing that guys struggle with their wives, where you could tell your wife something till you're blue in the face.
Oh, yeah.
Comes from somebody else, they're going to listen to you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. All around. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for that feedback. I know that there are plenty of listeners out there that are interested in what those secret sauce ingredients are to get that adoption. So awesome. Thank you so much. And that wraps us up for this episode of Dear Frannie. Please join us again for our next episode with Don and Nancy. And we look forward to hearing your questions. Please email us at hello@franchisefractionals.com if you have a question that you'd like to submit. Thanks, guys, for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.